All right, and we are joined by two devs from the WoW Classic team. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself. I'll let Clay go first. How you doing? And please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, everybody. So I'm Clayton, Associate Production Director on WoW Classic. Excited to be here and be talking about season discovery and everything that we're working on WoW Classic.
Awesome,
Hi.
awesome. And Anna.
Hi, I am Anna Resendez, one of the lead software engineers in the World Warcraft Classic team, and also super excited to talk to you guys about Season of Discovery coming up really soon.
Awesome.
So soon.
That was a really cool thing at BlizzCon. I'd be like, what? Okay. All right, well, we don't have a ton of time, so I'm just going to jump right in here. I'm going to start with balance. So since the demo that we tried at BlizzCon, you guys have been actively, we've seen from different data mining, you guys have been actively nerfing, buffing, doing a lot of stuff to the classes, which is awesome. But do you plan on doing that after launch, or will you be a little bit more reserved? Or will you do it on a time schedule, like a patch day or something?
That's a really good question. When we're talking about Season of Discovery, one of the things that we talked about was balance, right? And what's our philosophy there? And we are looking into, our goal is not to balance so every single role and every single spec and every single DPS, healer, tank has the same abilities, the same power. That's not where we're going with the balance on Season of Discovery. Our balance is more around fun. We really want that every single class has something fun, right? Whenever you go in and play one of the classes, we want you to be very excited about the different runes that you get to play with in Season of Discovery, and that you're okay, I really want to play a mage because I want to play with the time grab and all of these kind of things. That said, we do realize that some of those might be a little bit, too out there or too on the extremes, right? And that's the kind of abilities that after the playtest we've been taking a look at and be okay, this is going to be very, very, very unbalanced and potentially remove the fun from other runes or classes. So that's the main thing that we've been targeting. That said, we are going to be taking a look at how it evolves. We don't envision to have changes on the first couple weeks, because we want to give it enough time for players to go in, get their runes, explore, get all the way to level 25, and then start playing with it, and then we're going to get some data and some feedback from the players and see how things are going and see if there are any changes that needed to be made. That said, I'm not saying absolutely not before that. Of course, if something seems completely out of whack, we might take a look at. But we really want to give it a little bit of time for it to cook a little bit before we actually go in and start tuning things.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Anna nailed it. I think it comes down to targeted class changes for us. So nothing on a regular cadence, but something that we're actively looking at. And even pre-launch, some of the changes that eagle-eyed watchers may have spotted are the result of a lot of the internal playtesting that we do, and certainly feedback from the BlizzCon demo. But yeah, that something we'll be watching quite heavily.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well,
are there I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go.
Are there any sleeper classes that you guys feel are going to be really cool that nobody's really talking about?
That's tough. I also don't want to promote one over any others.
Okay,
I feel like everybody's talking about everything, and everybody's.
I have the same of that no one's talking about. It's I feel like everybody's been really going into it. Even we know that shamans and paladins are only exclusive to their own faction, and sometimes they tend to be less chosen because of, just because of numbers, right? But people are having so many questions about shamans, so many questions about paladins. Everybody's just been super excited about all of the changes.
They all look very fun.
Everybody seems to think their class is going to be the overpowered one. That's what I love.
True.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you saw the presentation of what's next. What Nora talked about, like, making warriors OP. Maybe it was a joke, but yeah. We want everyone to feel like there's some fun to have in each of the different classes, and that you don't have to play in a specific class.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
so I'm looking forward to seeing how players respond to how these classes evolve as we unlock new runes for players to find. And the classes really will evolve. And the way that you play a class in this first level 1 to 25 bracket may change quite substantially when new runes are found, when, let's say, the next level cap is unlocked.
There's going to be stuff to look at and stuff to change throughout the entire experience, and I'm looking forward to that. Let's move on to PvP. So we recently had a blue post talking about faction server balance, and you guys are going to actively try to make it so that Horde and Alliance are equal. How do you plan to attack such a task? Are you going to have automated stuff that kind of locks it, or are you going to have somebody actively watching it?
Yeah, so we're going to give it a go, as Tom said. This is, you hit on a lot of the key points there. This is something that we've never really attempted before with such an active hand in it. And internal discussions about this, certainly around the spirit of Season of Discovery and these different things that we're trying with different classes and the new content that we're adding, kind of led itself to, hey, if we're going to try something like this, what better time than Season of Discovery to do it? So in the development of it and from the internal discussion, it did result in us creating some new tools and some new methods at looking at this and some actions that we can take to sort of enforce this faction balance. We're not going to get too into the weeds on how we're doing it, simply because we don't want players to circumvent some of our actions or what our plans are here. But it is a combination of some automation that we're doing with these tools, and then having some folks really closely watch the faction balance on these realms. I think we may have dipped into discussing it a little bit in the past, but what that means is there may be times where if faction balance on a realm gets too imbalanced, a player trying to roll a new character of a dominant faction might not be able to temporarily until that faction balance is restored to a more equal playing field. We think that that's worth it. Certainly for the start of Season of Discovery, we think that the benefits of that outweigh some of the challenges or hindrances associated to it. Now, that being said, as time goes on, if it turns out that we were wrong and the player base, our community that's been, shouting for this and saying that they wanted it forever, if it turns out we're all wrong and nobody wants, faction balanced PvP realms, we will certainly change course if we need to. But right now, with the way things are looking and with our strategy to do this, we're feeling confident in it, and we think that players are going to enjoy having these faction balanced PvP realms.
Definitely.
Yeah. I just want to add, just so everybody knows, that these restrictions are gonna only be for PvP servers. If you're in a place where you really wanted to play a specific faction and you're trying to create a character and you can't, you are always welcome to do so in PvE servers. PvE servers won't have any of these restrictions.
And honestly, I think that the whole reason the PvP servers turned into what they were is I believe the majority of people wanted to be on a server with the other faction. It's just once the snowball starts to roll and you get to about 65-35, that's when it just becomes extremely hard. I think players are kind of, that's what happened to me. I was just kind of forced. I was like, well, this is the best choice. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and I hope others do too. So layers on PvP servers. Is there anything in place to try to balance the layers, to kind of have 50-50 on the layers? Because that's another way to kind of balance it out to make it feel better. I'm curious, if you're seeing too many players in one layer, is it going to move people from the faction that has more people on that layer?
That's how it works in the modern game, right? Where you go into the war mode and it tries to balance things out according to the area. But we haven't bring that technology into Classic, so there's not going to be an extra logic. We want to first go and see how this is the first time that we are trying to enforce an actual server balance. And from there, we're going to take a look at how it evolved, how it plays, and if there are any kind of adjustments. But currently, there's not going to be a system that will force you into like a different layer. That said, the system itself that creates the layers, it's kind of like faction agnostic. So it like in just by the way it works, it shouldn't have a preference for each of the different factions. So it should be overall like pretty even between the two factions just by the way of the nature of how it works, but there's nothing really enforcing it.
Okay.
But definitely something that we can take a look at once we see how the whole balancing the realm goes.
Okay.
Yeah, we think, I think as Anna talked about in the BlizzCon follow-up Wowcast video that we did, the realms now can hold so many more people, so many more players concurrently. We hope that with that increase in scale, that'll help to sort of balance, not only balance in the faction of players who are entering as well, but in the layers as well. But it's certainly something, as Anna mentioned, that we want to keep a close eye on. And if we need to make some adjustments there, we can.
Okay. How will layers work in open PvP zones like Ashenvale, or are you planning to do something more like Wrath's Wintergrasp where it's an actual instanced area?
It's not going to be an instanced. I think that's something that it's very unique about WoW Classic is PvP, right? It definitely PvP has evolved a lot during the different years and the different expansions, starting with Burning Crusade and having arenas into, Wintergrasp and other kind of like places that are evolved. That said, we really believe that a big part of the essence of PvP in the Era universe is the world PvP and you're actually in the world and you're going to be finding people from your different factions. So we wanted to go with that idea in mind. And the Ashenvale event is an event that happens in the world, and we wanted to affect the world. It is a mainly PvP event, but it's also going to have like a couple of like PvE interactions and stuff like that. So we wanted to be a place of like a contested place in the actual world. So that said, that's going to work really similar to, how when you go to Gurabashi Arena works, right? Like where, in this case, the event is like there's a chest in the middle of the map, right? And then you get to go and get the chest, right? So it's gonna work similar to that, where like each of the different layers might have a different phase of it, of the event.
Interesting.
To be
Okay.
open to banning rogues from Ashenvale, just in general.
I think
kidding.
our class design team might shy away from that, but I appreciate the feedback regardless. We'll share it. We'll share it with the team. We'll discuss.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect. The next thing is PvP balance. Are you worried about lots of these PvE things? I mean, there's no way to tell what's going to happen in PvP, and that's kind of the neat thing. But are you worried about like basically one shot type of situations
with the new runes and stuff?
Yeah, would there ever be a time where you would make a rune not active in PvP but active in PvE type of deal?
I think that we would take a look. Like definitely PvP has been one of the things that we have been taking into consideration when like all of the rune acquisition and everything is happening. That said, as I mentioned, the PvP in Era, it's very different than the PvP in the progression servers in the sense of like we don't have arenas. Arenas create a situation where the balance of the different classes is really, really, really important because that's the battle, right? Like you're basically battling just like 3 people versus 3, even 5v5, and having some classes be completely out there might really diminish that. But when you're going into a more world event, world PvP, we're going to expect to see way more people and more of a mix of different classes. So we are not promising that we're going to try to balance the classes all in PvP. But that said, as you mentioned, if there's any outliers out there that is like, okay, this is definitely having like very, very not fun, unintended consequences for the classes, we might take a look at that. So it's definitely something that we're going to keep an eye on it. But no promises on a complete balance of all the classes around each other, right?
That's impossible regardless. So nobody should think that that's a thing.
No, I get it. Yeah, fair enough. But there's like there's that part where we do want to make sure that like people are having fun too, right? Like we don't, as you mentioned, like if something is like completely unfun, we want to take a look at that. Or the other thing too is that being completely transparent here, we're going without a PTR, so there's gonna be some things that the team might not have caught, right? Like certain interactions of certain items, plus their new rune abilities, and we're like definitely open to hear about them and make certain adjustments.
Just coming from us, we appreciate the no PTR. That got us yelling at BlizzCon. I mean, we love that. So we're okay with some bugs to start with, and everybody should expect that, in my opinion.
That said, we are definitely, especially on Thursday, we have a group of people that are going to be there watching really closely and trying to mitigate any kind of like, random things or things going on fire. So we definitely have a plan of action.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody will find it right away.
It seemed like you were definitely on top of it. So the last thing about PvP balance real quickly is the one thing that freaks me out is DPS specs that are now tanks that have the tank runes, and then combining that with the PvP helms. That seems like a lot of crit resistance, and it seems like you'd be able to just take that and still be a full DPS spec. And in PvP, that sounds broken. That's the thing that I'm worried about. I wondered if you guys have worried about that at all, or just going to see what happens.
Yeah, so this has actually come up a couple times in the team, and unfortunately, I am not the one who balances classes directly, but I want to make sure we're prepared just in case. So I'm going to draw upon a quick message I received from Aiden Moon, who's on our team, and I'll go ahead and read it because he does a better job talking about than I do. And he said, the tank rune critical strike reduction is to make them uncrittable in PvE and essentially doing what the defense stat does for tank classes, but without needing to introduce a bunch of cloth, leather, mail gear, etc., with defense points taking away from the budget on those items. That being said, other classes are gaining more damage and critical strike than they had before, so some of it balances out. I don't expect tanks to be too overpowered in PvP, but if they are, we'll move forward with tuning changes. So there you go. From one of the team members working on it. That's what we had to say about it for the time being. But the concern, I definitely understand the concern.
It seems with the helm, it's just a really big buff, and tanks seem to be like pretty scary. But that's one route I could see going to PvE only, like the ones that specifically give you uncrittable. But only time will tell, right?
I mean, it's difficult to put a rune to only apply for PvP, right? Like, I mean, I think that we have had examples like that in arenas. In arenas before, right, where it's really easy to just remove it, right? Like from arenas and then or battlegrounds potentially, right? But when we're talking about world PvP, like, unless, we make adjustments so it doesn't affect other players, then maybe potentially that could be a way.
Which would be hard to do with a resistance stat rather than a move itself. I get you.
So it's more of like, I mean, in the past, the way that we have handled that is just like, okay, certain items you cannot just, or runes abilities you cannot use in arenas, let's say. But in this case, we would have, like, we will definitely think about it and think about solutions. But, also talking about items, like we're really going to take a look before we start thinking about potentially gating the runes to certain situations, because we want it to be a very much an experience that you feel like you can take this everywhere in the world. So we're definitely gonna have a look about how this all interacts before, really adding restrictions to them.
Awesome.
That makes sense.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the future of runes. With the knowledge that more runes are going to come out for possibly other gear slots, I don't want to get into spoilers, possibly, is there a time where you might be only allowed to put on maybe 4 runes total across 4 pieces of gear, or 5 runes, or is there going to be maybe a cap on that? Or if possible, would people be able to use 8 runes across... does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So just so I make sure I understand, you're talking about more than one rune for each slot, or there's more slots and we just keep increasing the number of slots that you can move runes into?
Well, if there's more slots on different gear, will you be allowed to use all of those rune slots, or will it be like, oh, okay, we have slots for 8 pieces of gear, but you can only put runes on 4 pieces total at any one time? Is that going to be something you guys are planning on or thinking about?
So in the hypothetical scenario where we add more slots, I would expect us to allow players to put a rune in each of those slots. Obviously, that's something we have to be careful about. What are these new runes that are, placeable in particular slots, and how do they work in conjunction with other runes that players have already collected that may be used in existing slots? The team is up to the challenge. Now, that being said, we haven't moved into those phases of Season of Discovery yet. So it is certainly subject to change.
Everything is, right? So
it's that is a constant theme. Fortunately and unfortunately, in most of our answers and most of our discussions about this, so much of the season is about listening to player feedback and making changes and adjustments to things based on what players are really enjoying, and that's going to continue throughout the rest of the season.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Do you guys anticipate that as you add new runes, or if you add new runes each phase, those runes aren't currently in the game, right? They're not like, you can't discover level 40 runes right when it launches, right?
Correct. Yeah. So the only runes that you'll be able to find, the different discoveries related to them, you are only up through the level 25 bracket. Now, that being said, we don't want to stop players from exploring and venturing out of those level 25 zones if they want to, but that's correct. They will not find level 40 runes.
Okay.
Awesome. With all the new roles, is there plans for new gear with new tier bonuses?
Great question. Figuring out how much we've talked about this or are interested in it in the past. I will say there is certainly interest in this on the team, but nothing to announce today.
Okay, good deal.
Unless Anna has more.
No. Well, I was just gonna say that there's definitely gonna be new gear as Tim mentioned in the What's Next panel, and also if you got to play the Season of Discovery demo, you probably saw that
I alluded some, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So definitely there's gonna be new gear, at least for the first level band.
What about in dungeons though? Like, will there be new gear or re-itemized gear in dungeons or quest lines?
Not in dungeons for the first phase. Most of it is coming from the new raids. That said, there might be a couple of adjustments to the PvP system rewards. Very, very small adjustments that might be coming. But most of the new items are going to be, for now, for the level 1, for the level 25 phase, around the new raid encounters.
Okay. Big one here, and I can't stress it enough. Are we going to get dual spec from the start?
Gosh, I think the only thing that has been mentioned about this was something that Josh mentioned on stage at BlizzCon. I don't think we have said anything else. Unfortunately, I can't say anything else about this today.
Okay.
But other than we hear the desire, we certainly hear the desire for it.
I love world
sure.
PvP, but only if I'm properly prepared, you know?
Who knows now? Level 25 with new runes, you might like it again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there might be other situations where, because I mean, even rogues in vanilla could have a PvP spec that was viable-ish for PvE. Warriors could not.
Right. Do you guys have any idea for future raid sizes on if we're going to have 40 main raids or if you guys are going to scale those down?
Yeah, so when we think about the end game 40-player raids, they won't be in from the start, so they're not accessible. It is our intent to roll these out once we reach that once we reach the level 60 level cap. The raids themselves, those raids are so iconic. It's tough for us to want to make a lot of changes to them. When we think about changes, we think more in terms of some of the changes that you may have seen in Season of Mastery. But that being said, when we think about the newer raid experiences that we're building, like Black Fathom Deeps and what we'll be doing beyond that, I would certainly expect those to be more of the 10-player range. But again, going back to it, everything is still on the table. And as we progress through, if the desire for heavier changes is something that's really strong in the community, I think that's something that we would look at. Anna, did you want to mention anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this is the first time that we're doing what we're calling leveling up rates, where we're having rates at this lower level. And definitely something that we are looking into is the approachability of it, right? Like we don't, and that's why we decided to do a level 10 raid. Also because of the space that we have, but it's a very good way for players and especially new players to dip their toes into raiding. And it made sense that like at lower levels, you might not need a full group of 40 people to go in and fight the bosses, but
Sure.
taking in like the step up from a dungeon of 5 people to 10 seems way less scarier than let's go hang out with 40 other people. So definitely that's something that we took into consideration when we're talking about the level bands. But as we go through the level bands, we might see some changes or we might not. We might still think that leveling content should be within that kind of a space of 10-player men.
Awesome.
Or women.
Hey, I think I know the answer to this question, but are there any quality of life changes planned? For instance, rogue poisons, changes of any kind, like where you buy poison instead of making them, sticky combo points for rogues that tank, when taking multiple mobs, gear score, mount casting speed, mob tagging. But I feel like every change that's going to happen is going to be through runes, just because of what's been said in the past about moving people to era after the season's over.
Yeah, so I think it was the first one that you mentioned about rogue poisons. We have certainly heard concerns and feedback about this. I'm pleased to say that we are making some adjustments here. I'm not sure how well that's known out there yet, so I won't go further into it, but we are making adjustments there. When we think about other quality of life changes, one of the things that we constantly keep in mind is how does that affect the feeling of classic? We want this to still feel classic through and through. If it's things like mount casting speed or something like that, if we drastically change that, is it still going to feel like classic?
It could hurt world PvP too, right?
Sure. Yeah. So something that the team is certainly interested in looking at and hearing feedback on, but not if it veers away from the season feeling like classic still.
Is that the reason?
We're out of time too. We got to let them go.
Let me ask one last question. Is that the reason that most of the runes and abilities that we've seen that are similar to ones later on in later expansions, is that the reason they only affect party rather than raid? Was that a specific classic choice to make it so it was party only?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Did I throw you off? Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I'm not sure if that's the reason why. I think that if we did that, we haven't had a lot of discussion about it. I don't know, Anna, what do you think?
Well, I mean, definitely. Well, we were looking into bringing abilities from the future and not, from future expansions, not necessarily the ones that are newer. many times we did based ourselves into what already worked right before and what the abilities look like in the future. So a lot of it was like, okay, this is how the ability works within our current classic progression. So let's bring them over. But I think that this is something that happens very, very often in the classic universe, where it's like your abilities, like you have to be very thoughtful of which group you're in whenever you are in a raid, depending on your buffs and all of that. And you're going to have to make a choice, right? Of like, okay, this is only going to affect this amount of people. And I feel like that's something very classic-y. So we want to also kind of continue that feeling, right? Because that's where the challenge is of like, we do want to introduce new abilities. We want to introduce abilities from the future, but at the same time, we don't want it to feel like this is not classic anymore. This is not vanilla, like era, in the era environment. We still want you to feel like you're in the era environment and that these fit in, right? So we're definitely taking into consideration all of those.
I think that's also why you see that even though some of the abilities are recognizable, we've still made some changes, and they may not act or behave exactly like you think that they're going to.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to get into it. And thank you guys so much for your time. I know we're out of time, and thank you for indulging that last question. And yeah, we'll let you go.
Thank you. Thank you for all the great questions. I keep hearing it gets compared to a classic, I think it's 80s cartoon that I grew up watching about a particular set of puppets that are.
I've told the Muppet Babies thing forever. That's what it feels like. Like the Gren video that he did, where it's like you're like scrolling through BFD and everybody's in that small armor. I mean, it just looks like that. And so many people are like, I don't know if I know that reference. I'm like, okay, well, just think of anything like anything miniaturized, and it's perfect. It's so cool.
I'm super excited. I'm super excited for Season of Discovery and just like going and trying out the new raid, the new abilities, like getting all the discoveries. It's gonna be really, really fun, and I think it's gonna really give a new point of view to Classic and to WoW itself. Like I'm just so excited.
Yep.
For sure.
We'll be right there too. I mean, we're going to be there. We'll be there on launch day. We'll be in there rolling new characters and and
unless something caught on fire, then I'm gonna go put it out. But definitely gonna be there with you guys. Yeah.
You see Anna awesome. AFK, you know why something.
Yeah, definitely. Players' happiness is my priority. I'm a player, so maybe like playing myself should know. It's okay. I definitely want everyone to have a really good experience.
Well, awesome. We thank you for all that you do, and we will let you go and see you sometime soon, hopefully.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for checking out Warcraft Reloaded podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content.